I don't know what I'm doing with my hands today. I'm on a rant and this probably doesn't make any sense. I lost my train of thought. It hurts me to talk about this. This whole video is a mess. Hey everyone, it's Olivia and welcome back to my channel. So this video has been a long time coming. If you watched some of my previous videos, then you know that I've mentioned this at least twice by now, and I finally got around to filming this review. So it's been a while since I read this book, maybe about 2 months or so, but I did write down all my thoughts. So these are my initial thoughts and also some of my more recent thoughts. They haven't really changed. Like I mentioned in some of my previous videos, I think I mentioned it twice now, I read Again But Better by Christine. She published this book over a year ago and I was really excited to read this because I'm a huge fan of Christine, and when she said that she was publishing a book, I got really excited. I was also really excited by the premise, so I'm trying to make this video as organized as possible, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna end up being a mess anyway. Let me just start off with a summary of the book. So Again But Better is about Shane, who's a 20-year-old college student. She's in the pre-med program and she feels like she's doing college all wrong. So she doesn't have much of a social life and she wants to change that. So she decides to take a semester abroad in London, and instead of doing a pre-med program, she decides to do a writing program because her passion is actually writing and not medicine. Her parents have pressured her into following that path, and she feels like the semester abroad will help her really explore that passion for writing. So she has a list of goals that she wants to accomplish for her semester abroad, and they are to make friends, to travel, to find adventure, and to kiss a boy. But of course, nothing really goes to plan. Things start falling apart and she doesn't really know if she can salvage it. But with the help of a little magic, maybe she can. I like the premise particularly because it's about a college-aged student, which we don't read many books about college students. We read a lot more that takes place in high school or like the summer before they go off to college and stuff like that. So I was really excited as a college student myself. I couldn't get my hands on this book when it was released. That's why I didn't read it until like a year later pretty much. I got a copy from the library, so I don't have a physical copy to hold. So you're probably gonna see me doing weird things with my hands at some point because I don't have a book to hold. And I read it a few months ago when I was actually still in college. And for some reason, because I was graduating, I was like, I need to read this book when I'm in college because it will help the experience of reading this book about somebody else who is also in college. I don't know why, because even like looking back at it now, I could have read it now and still felt the same things about it, but whatever. If you watch some of my previous videos, then you already know that unfortunately I didn't actually like this book. I was really disappointed in it. Maybe it's because I was too excited for it, but honestly I feel like this book is not good. I just had a lot of feelings about this book and I wanted to share them all with you. So the book is written in the first person perspective from the character Shane. So we basically just follow her entire experience throughout the entire book and see her thoughts and her emotions. Her voice is very distinct and it's very unique. I definitely have not read a character POV that has been written in this type of voice. If you read reviews, then you already know that the character Shane is basically the author Christine. She's interested in the same fandoms, TV shows, books, and it's very Christine. And this is the only thing that I want to mention in terms of their similarities because the voice is so distinctly Christine. If you watched any of her videos, then you know that she's full of energy and she's really excited about stuff. For me personally, I felt like it didn't read as well on paper as it does when you listen to Christine talk. And I just felt like for a book, it didn't read well. Her excitement on the page kind of just gets really redundant and annoying to me because the repetition of words, the overuse of caps to express excitement didn't sit well with me in terms of words on a page that you read versus listening to someone express their excitement through their voice. I didn't listen to the audiobook, but maybe that presents the voice better. I also feel like that's a major problem because this is a book and your audience consists of readers, and I feel like that kind of voice doesn't read well like with the eyes. And I also felt like that definitely affected the storytelling of the book as well. That was the only thing that I wanted to talk about specifically about Christine and Shane's similarities. The rest of this review is just gonna be purely based off of the book alone outside of the author. The rest of this review definitely contains spoilers, so if you don't want to get spoiled, if you haven't read the book, then I suggest that you watch one of my other videos on this channel. And if you want to hear all my specific thoughts about this book, then stick around. So I want to start off by talking talking about Shane, like I said, I felt like I could relate to her, especially because I was a college student myself, and I also am kind of socially awkward and have trouble making friends. So I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this character is somebody I'm going to relate to. Unfortunately, I didn't relate to her, but it's fine. You don't have to relate to a character that you're reading. But the thing about Shane is that I felt like she wasn't a character that I could root for either. And since she is the main character, that is a major problem in terms of reading the story, because I wasn't invested in her. I didn't really care much what happened to her within the book. Usually when I don't like a main character, there at least is a side character that I enjoy reading about. But in this book, there weren't any side characters that I cared about. I feel like they weren't explored thoroughly enough for me to even know much about any of the side characters. It was super focused on Shane and her love interest the most, and the other characters are kind of just there. They seem to just like fade into the background as the book carries on. Since I couldn't root for her or any of the other characters, this was a major problem when I was reading the book. Like, I struggled a lot with reading it because I just didn't care enough. I found Shane to be really immature and juvenile and obsessive. I was really disappointed to find that this character, who's supposed to be 20 years old, acted a lot like a 15-year-old girl, and that was really, really annoying to me, especially as somebody who's in their early 20s. Ooh. So I went and looked at a few of the reviews that say that this book reads young, and I would have to agree with that. As someone who's pretty much the same age and has a similar experience in terms of being socially awkward and not really having a direction in life, feeling a bit stuck in the place that you are, as well as not being in a romantic relationship, as well as having friends that are in the same boat as me, Shane did not read like a 20-year-old girl to me. Something that I find really ridiculous is that she's in a pre-med program, and pre-med is one of the most difficult programs to be in, but it also requires you to have social skills because you're going to be dealing with patients. And Shane has like zero chill. She's like superly overly energetic and a bit crazy, and I just feel like that doesn't translate well in her profession. Even though pre-med isn't the direction that she wants to go in, you'll find out later that she does end up becoming a doctor. To me, it feels kind of ridiculous that she doesn't have that level of maturity that you would associate with somebody who is going into the field of medicine. But she's still young, you know, maybe like 6 years of medical school will definitely calm her down. Spoiler alert, it doesn't, but we'll dive into that a little bit later. So another thing that I disliked about this book, I mentioned before that Shane was kind of obsessive, and I say kind of, but she really just was obsessive, period. This book has insta-love. It's not my favorite thing in the whole world, but a lot of contemporary novels have insta-love, so it's not something that I felt was completely out of the blue. But particularly in this book, I felt like it was so extreme. It felt like really creepy to me. The moment that Shane sets eyes on this boy Pilot, she immediately becomes obsessed. Like, she literally just looked at him, was like, this is going to be the boy that I kiss. And I was like, okay, creepy, and like, calm down, girl. This wasn't in a love at first sight type thing. It was more of a, this is a cute boy that I just met and I just landed in London, and you know what? He's gonna be the boy that I kiss. And that's just how I felt like her thought process went. She only met him once, and actually she didn't even meet him properly, because apparently in the place that they were staying, the window in her room was like a window into like their common kitchen area, and he was in the kitchen. So like, they looked at each other through this window, and she was immediately like, that one, I want him. And I was just like, you didn't even really talk to him yet. And because it's written in her perspective, we see her entire thought process in relation to Pilot and the way that she reads their interactions with each other as this romantic kind of interaction. And it seems so obsessive to me. Gosh, I think it was like they're sitting next to each other and like their shoulders are touching, and she just goes, this is romance. And I was like over here like, are you just like really freaking naive, or are you just crazy? It was obsessive, and I felt really uncomfortable reading it. She literally just attaches herself to him, like she's really clingy. And even though Pilot does kind of show an interest in her in return, it still felt really forced. Like, their relationship feels so forced, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. I also want to mention that the other guy that was in the kitchen with Pilot the first time that Shane saw him was gay, which immediately just wrote him off as not a love interest for Shane. And I don't like love triangles or whatever, but I just felt like it was really ridiculous that the one person she set her eyes on was also straight. It felt like a cheap and dirty trick to just write him off as this character who is just Oh, no, not a love interest for Shane and barely even a friend. If you're gonna have a gay character for like brownie points and representation, then at least give him a little more depth. Like honestly, he was just there. She was like, oh, he's gay, bye. No. And also, speaking of gay characters in this book, Shane's cousin Leo, who we kind of hear barely anything about, but he's mentioned as sort of like this significant thing, but isn't really explored enough. Basically, Leo and Shane are cousins. They used to be really close friends, but Leo and his friends started like bullying Shane for being like this loner type girl and basically just being a dick. And it makes us feel sorry for Shane for having somebody kind of just stab her in the back like that, and we sympathize with her. Later, we find out that Leo is struggling with something, and we don't really know what until later. Shane asks him upfront what's wrong. He comes out to her, he's like, I'm gay, my family doesn't approve, stuff like that. And Shane basically is like, it's okay, and is supportive of him. There are two major issues that I have with this plot point within the book. Number one, just because you're struggling with your sexuality and you're in the closet does not give you an excuse to be a dick. It just doesn't. Like, that does not compute. Doesn't make any sense. The second issue that I have with this plot point is that Leo coming out and Shane being the one to support him just felt like a plot device in order to make Shane seem like a better person, because she's the only one in Leo's life who accepts him as he is and tells him that it's all okay. This moment didn't really have any other purpose other than that in the book, especially because Leo isn't even mentioned that often and we don't really get to know him as a character. Like, we don't really see him. We just have Shane's thoughts on him and their messages. So I just felt like this was just used as a device to make Shane seem like a better person, and honestly, it just totally wrote off this character, like this coming out moment, as service to Shane's character. And then also she just sort of forgives him for all of that bullying that he did to her just because he was struggling with his sexuality. Like, I don't want to make LGBT characters the bad guys, but he was just a bad person and all of a sudden their relationship is all good. Yeah, I don't think so. That was completely unnecessary and that didn't even need to be in the book. It felt really insignificant in comparison to all the other things that were happening in the book, and it was just really random. Let's talk about the main love interest. His name is Pilot Pen. Like the brand of pen. My heart goes out to this character for having this name because he definitely got bullied in school, like all the time. And you know what? Is this a part of his character's backstory? No, it's not, and I feel like it should have been. Everybody's just like, oh, pilot? You mean like the type of person who drives an airplane? Or in Shane's case, you mean the first episode in a television series? Side note, I just want to say, I felt like the amount of pop culture references that Shane makes is supposed to make her seem like quirky or something, or constantly remind you what year it is. It's supposed to be 2011, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. But the amount of times she mentions something related to TV or books, it is so frustrating because to me, it feels like she's supposed to be written as sort of this quirky character, but tons of people watch TV and tons of people read books. It's not something that's unique. It's not quirky. It's just ridiculous the amount of times she can throw pop culture references into a conversation that really doesn't warrant having a pop culture reference in it. And I do want to say that I am guilty of kind of making references to things without it really having a purpose in conversation, but the amount of times that it happens in here is a little ridiculous in my opinion. I just feel like fiction imitates life, but it shouldn't be like full on about life. If you watch my review on What If It's Us, I think I mentioned a lot about the references to Hamilton and other pop culture references. I thought it was excessive in that book. In comparison to this, that thing is mild. Anyway, I went off topic. Back to Pilot. So Pilot is basically like the other main character in the book because everything revolves around him and Shane's interest in him and their like romantic arc. And Shane basically thinks about him all the time, constantly, even when she's like in class or at her internship, she's always thinking about Pilot. And I'm like, girl, you need to calm down. Like, you're here to chase your writing dreams. Like, could you at least put that on the back burner and like focus a little bit more on something else in your life? I also didn't like him as a character. Like, individually by himself, he sucks. With Shane, he also sucks. I feel like with relationships, you want to like them together, but you also want to like them as individuals and apart. And I don't like them as individuals, and I definitely don't like them together. He just seemed like a basic cookie cutter love interest that you read a lot of in contemporary novels. He wasn't really that interesting to me, like, at all. There weren't any qualities to him that I felt like were interesting or compelling. He was pretty bland. But I think one of the most prominent reasons why I don't like like Pilot as a character and as a love interest for Shane is because he had a girlfriend. He had a girlfriend. He was leading Shane on. You could say that Shane possibly was reading way into their interactions, but he actually does return her feelings. And to me, that is just so wrong. Cheating is never okay. And I hate reading books where they encourage it. And cheating comes in different forms as well. Like emotional cheating is real. And I definitely cannot condone this relationship, particularly because of the cheating. It's the most unforgivable thing, and yet everybody in the book seems to be okay with it. Even Shane's friend Babe encourages Shane to go after Pilot even though they both know that he has a girlfriend. And Pilot claims like, oh, like our relationship's not really like serious or whatever, like I'm studying abroad so we're kind of doing our own thing. But then his girlfriend shows up in London to surprise him. Obviously your communication skills with your girlfriend are not clear and you're leading on this other girl who's totally obsessed with you. It's just all a mess. Right off the bat, Pilot was not worth it, like at all. He was not worth all of this like emotional trauma and definitely not worth going back in time for to pursue a relationship with. That makes absolutely no sense to me. So let's talk about their relationship. I mentioned before, I thought that it was really, really forced and it totally was. I honestly think that Shane and Pilot had zero chemistry. Like they are terrible together. It's extremely obvious from the beginning that they're gonna end up together. Like I said, insta love, you already immediately know. And I was really, really hoping that they didn't, just because they are so bad for each other and they're terrible. The only reason why I like them together is that if they're together, they're not causing havoc with other people, because literally being in a relationship with either one of them would be terrible. They kind of deserve each other in that sort of way, but still do not like it. There are so many reasons why I don't like them together, but the one moment in the book that I feel like just kind of defines their relationship that like I remember so vividly is that they're like talking and they're talking about their relationship and they're talking about how similar to like in Harry Potter when Severus Snape has like that after all this time always moment, they're talking about how, oh, we should have one of those moments in our relationship. And I was like, okay, fine, yeah, everybody has sort of those cute little like references that they have, like these inside joke things that they have with their significant other, that's fine. But they literally force this moment. And this is why I think it defines their relationship, because I feel like it's so unnatural and forced. They literally are like, okay, let's just come up with a word that is gonna be special to us. No context, like zero context. They're just like shooting off random ass words. And then I think it's Shane who says that, who is like, how about lamppost? Lamppost. Because she saw a lamppost in the street and was like, that's it. That's gonna be our word. And it's just like lamppost. And she's like, yeah, lamppost. And I'm like, what? That is the most cringeworthy and uncomfortable thing I've ever read in my life. You can't just like inorganically create things to make it seem like your relationship is the equivalent significant moment in a book. Shane literally suggests this one thing that she associates with romantic relationships from her experience reading books and watching TV. So keep in mind that Shane's never been in a real relationship before. So basically all of her notions of romance are from the media, which is not really accurate. So she doesn't really know how real relationships are supposed to be. She has this idea and this fantasy of how it's supposed to be, and she's trying to force that into her relationship with Pilot, which doesn't feel right like at all. Again, there was no real context for them to create this word lamppost as their word. The context was literally, I want a word that is romantic like this moment in this book that I am a fan of. That is the context, which is the most inorganic thing to ever happen. There was legitimately no moment that actually included a lamppost other than them pointing at one and being like, yep, that's it. There's a lamppost there when we're having this conversation, and that's gonna be our word. And they do reference to that moment later on in the book, which makes it their word, but it still is so unnatural. I'm cringing. It hurts me to talk about this. Here's the thing. There should have been a scene that goes like this, right? Okay. Pilot is like, oh, we're traveling to this other country. if we ever get lost, then we should meet up at this lamppost. Like, that would be a legitimate reason why lampposts would have some kind of significance. So maybe the scene would be they get separated and they're on the phone with each other and they're like, where'd you go? And he's like, oh, I'm over here. And she's like, oh, I don't see you. And he's like, wait, remember I said meet by the lamppost if we ever get separated. And Shane's like, okay, so lamppost? And then he goes, lamppost. And wouldn't that have been such a cute moment? Like, it would have been so much more organic and real. Like, it was actually grounded in the story and the situation that they were in, rather than them literally just making up this random ass word and then using it to reference back, and it's supposed to be like this cute romantic moment, and really it's just really, really cringy. Yeah, so that's one of the main points as to why I feel like their relationship is so forced. There are a lot of moments throughout the book that expresses that, but that one in particular is the one that just does not sit well with me and kind of haunts me. Okay, this is random, but like another point that I didn't really like in the book. So there's this guy that randomly kisses Shane in a club, and it's not too random. They kind of have like a flirtatious thing going on, but he literally just assaults her, and she was like, I wasn't expecting this, but I'ma do it because I haven't kissed anyone yet, and like that's one of my goals. And she literally kisses him back despite the fact that he literally just assaulted her. And suddenly that's okay because, you know what, I didn't want to kiss him, but now that he's kissing me, I do want to kiss him back. And I'm like, girl, no. There's so many red flags just going up here. I'm like, Shane, you're so stupid. But also, what the heck? Like, this is definitely not a message you want to have in your book, is like, oh, if someone kisses you, it's fine, like just kiss them back. Shane's moral compass is like really, really broken. Basically, her experiences in real life, she keeps trying to equate to like moments that she's read in books or seen in shows and movies, and it's just wrong. Like, she doesn't have genuine real life experience, and I just feel like her expectations of things is really fictional and ridiculous. Another thing about her moral compass and how it's broken is that Pilot has a phone call with his girlfriend, and literally the whole time, and this is like not even that long after they've met, the whole time Shane is just thinking, oh my god, is he breaking up with her? Like, I hope he is. Like, we have this thing going on. Like, is he gonna tell her? And she just keeps on thinking about Pilot and his girlfriend and being like, oh my god, is he gonna break up with her for me? And I'm just like, girl, you're so obsessed. And like, that's just kind of creepy. Stop. One of the things that I hate the most about this book is because the whole foundation of the reason why Shane is even studying abroad is because her parents have forced her to go into med school. So she's in pre-med right now. They're gonna make her go to med school and make her become a doctor. They are pressuring her to go down this path. Totally understand that. The thing is that there is a plot thread about Shane's relationship with her parent, and her parents are really verbally abusive, and it's never addressed in the book. It's just kind of hinted at here and there, and like, Shane definitely feels guilty, but her emotions in relation to her relationship with her parents is never really explored, and I feel like it was just like brushed under the rug, and it definitely was a plot point that I feel like should have been explored a lot more in the book and would have created a lot more depth for her character, knowing more about her background and her relationship with her parents, but that wasn't explored at all. So the major thing about this is that Shane's parents are the ones who are paying for her study abroad program, and she told them that it was a pre-med program when really it's a writing program, and she even created like this fake brochure and everything to show her parents. And this just frustrated me so much because she's lying to them about what kind of program this is, and they are the ones who are funding it. Like, Shane literally never thinks about paying for it for herself. She just was like, you know what, like, they're gonna pay for it and I'm gonna lie to them and I'm gonna go off and do my own thing, and that just frustrated me so much. Like, maybe her relationship with her parents is really, really bad. Maybe her parents deserve to be splurging a bunch of money on something that they think is one thing when it really isn't. Like, whatever, okay, but it still makes me really mad because she is so entitled. You can tell by the cover, like, Shane is a white girl. She's privileged, like, her parents are putting her through med school. Like, that's expensive stuff right there. And she's so entitled because she doesn't even think about paying for the program herself when it's something that she knows her parents wouldn't approve of and definitely wouldn't fund if they knew the truth. I also want to say that she also has an internship with a magazine when she's in London, and she got that internship by herself. She could spend all that time that she didn't have a social life in college having a part-time job so that she could fund her own trip to London, and maybe her parents wouldn't let her go, but what are they really gonna do if she's paying for it, you know? Like, I just find it really ridiculous. And the thing is, because her relationship with her parents isn't explored thoroughly enough in the book, I don't really see the real reason why she feels like it's necessary to lie to her parents. Yes, they've pressured her. You can see that they're verbally abusive towards her, but we don't really get to explore her feelings about that or the history behind that. Does she feel like she has to do this because she's scared of her parents, or does she feel like she has to do it because she's obligated to do so because it is the child's duty to fulfill the dreams of their parent when they couldn't fulfill their own dreams by themselves? That's like not even mentioned in the book. I don't really understand Shane's motivation of following the path that her parents have set out for her. She doesn't even feel guilty about the fact that she lied to her parents and they're paying for this program. She's just like, you know what? They're paying for it and I'm lying to them, and you know what? I'll go back and I'll do whatever the heck that they want. They actually decide to surprise her in London. And her dad's behavior is like the most annoying thing. And the thing is, I know that people like this exist, but like it's never thoroughly addressed in the book. And that's what really frustrates me, is because it's there and you're like, oh my God, big red flag, right? Like this is a huge problem, but it's not explored enough. So basically he shows up to surprise her and he's like, you know what? We're going out to dinner and we're taking all of your friends. Like, I don't even care if they have other plans. They're gonna cancel them because we're here and everything's about us and we're gonna go out and eat. So they have this super awkward dinner with her parents kind of just forcing her friends to be there. Everybody's there. And anyway, the dad's like asking a bunch of questions, and he's specifically asking, I think her name's Sarah, who Shane had lied to her parents and told them that she was also in the pre-med program, which I don't know why she even had to lie about that, because Sarah was in pre-law and like literally everybody is in a different study abroad program. So I don't really understand why Shane felt the need to lie about somebody else's experience. Like she could have just lied and said, I'm the one who's in pre-med, none of them are. But basically the dad is like, oh, Sarah, like how's being in the pre-med program with Shane? And Sarah's kind of just sitting there being like, what are you talking about? Like I'm in pre-law, like there is no pre-med program. It's so awkward because like Pilot's trying to like direct the conversation towards him and the dad's just like, I'm not talking to you, like shut up, I'm talking to Sarah. And it was like really, really rude and really intense and like kind of like a really weird way of doing the reveal. So much tension, really awkward, really freaking scary. And then like her parents are just like, Shane, what the hell? And Shane's over here like, oh shit. Why did she feel the need to tell her parents that Sarah was in the pre-med program with her when she wasn't? Like that was unnecessary. She also didn't let them know about what she was doing, like make sure that there was like some kind of backup plan, because maybe it was like she convinced herself her parents wouldn't show up or find out, like that's fine. But like even right before they went to dinner, she could have just like pulled her aside and was like, hey, like please just cover for me. Lots of people lie to their parents and like this could have been like a normal thing. Like Sarah could have been a bitch and was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But she could have just agreed, and I feel like that would have just gotten rid of that problem, but whatever, tension. But the thing is, like her dad, they're sitting in this restaurant surrounded by all of Shane's friends, and he literally just goes, you little shit. Verbal abuse right there. Like he just gets so freaking mad, like stands up, is like, we're gonna let you stay in London, but when you come back you are going to do as we say, blah blah blah, and like storms out. And like Shane's like, I think she's crying in the restaurant, and everyone's just like awkwardly sitting around the table, and I was just like, okay. And then literally what happens is that Shane, like so ashamed of what she did, screws everything up for herself. And I'm just like, girl, what the heck? That should have been motivation. Like they're letting you stay in London. So she literally stays in London and quits her internship instead of actually like trying to prove to her parents that she can do something with writing as a career. She just quits and like goes and mopes around for the rest of the semester. And then she goes home, and we don't really see this part, but we know because there's a time jump later, we know that she goes home and she just goes through med school, basically becomes a doctor just because her parents said so. Like at no point did she consider, I could move out on my own. She's 20 years old. She's legally an adult. Like she can go off and do her own thing. Like she could even move in with Babe because they're friends. She could have went literally anywhere in the world, but maybe she loved her parents too much, but it didn't really seem that way to me. Like I don't really know what her motivations are for following this path that her parents have forced her on. It didn't make sense to me. And like the whole story hinges on that background information, and it makes no sense. Like at all. Wow, even my notes are a mess. So Shane just seems really self-centered to me because everything revolves around her. And I get like it's her book, her perspective. She lives in like this little bubble, and there are so many things that are happening outside of it that she doesn't really care about. I want to point out that she literally was friends with Babe for 6 years and literally had to go back in time to find out that her best friend's name was actually Barbara. Like, how do you not know that about your friend? It took her 6 years and time travel to figure that out. I'm just saying. Terrible friend. So I ultimately can't support Shane just because there are so many problems with her character, and the fact that she doesn't even realize how privileged she is. It just like hurts my soul. Shane is such a spoiled brat. She's a straight white rich girl who literally needs to check her privilege at the door because she basically is so inobservant of like all the things that are happening around her. Like she's so fully focused on her own problems and it's so stupid. So I feel like there wasn't really anything in this book that could salvage it. Like the whole experience was just such a struggle reading and like Shane's character did not improve. Typically the character has like this really nice arc, there's character development, you see her change. So there's a small fantastical element to this book. And if you couldn't guess by the title, it's called Again But Better. She literally time travels back in time to when she did the study abroad program in 2011 and does it all over again. The only reason why I kept reading the book was because the first half of the book I was like, oh, it's so frustrating, but I know she goes back in time and does it again, so hopefully she makes better decisions the second time around. I was really excited to see how it was gonna play out when she went back in time, and it was so disappointing because we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So basically, like my impressions for the book was that I was going to be reading about this girl who goes to London to study abroad and she makes friends and she pursues her dreams. But really the whole book was so focused on the romance between Shane and Pilot and their relationship that I thought it was such a missed opportunity to really explore all the other things that are happening in Shane's life. I hate books that make the main character so focused on like finding love or being in a relationship when there are so many more interesting things happening. Again, the basis of the book was that her parents were pressuring her to go into med school and she wanted to do this writing program to pursue her passion for writing. The book should have been about Shane studying abroad and doing this writing program to prove to her parents that writing could be a career that she could pursue. And then she has her articles published and she shows it to her parents and she says, look, I want to do this, I can do this, please just let me do this. And then her parents reluctantly let her do it, and then she becomes a published author, and along the way she also has this romantic thing with Pilot. He could have been a more interesting character. Like if he encouraged her to prove her parents wrong or something like that, he would have had more depth or importance than just being a love interest. Like he was really uninteresting, but like Shane was so obsessed with him and like the whole book is about them, and I felt like there are a million other things that would have been more interesting to write about in the book. Like her relationship with her parents could have been explored so much more, and in doing so it would have been more interesting and more well balanced if there was romance but also like familial issues. I was really hoping that Shane's character would develop more, especially because she basically repeats her whole semester abroad, and I just thought she would make better decisions, but ultimately like her decisions still were centered around Pilot and their relationship, and Pilot actually travels back in time with her, and so that just makes Pilot even more of a prominent character because he's also aware of the time travel that's happening. So let's talk about the second half of the book. So basically 6 years pass, it's 2017 now. Basically she's a doctor now. She literally has not talked to Pilot since they were in London together. Occasionally they have like that happy birthday post on Facebook or whatever, but they are living in the same area. Like she knows this about him. They literally haven't talked or seen each other in 6 years, but Shane still thinks about him and what they could be. But Shane has been in a long-term relationship. It's basically been like 5 years, I think, and she's basically engaged. I'm pretty sure he proposed and she hasn't quite said yes yet, or she said yes but is doubting getting married to him or something like that. Basically, she's been leading this guy on for 5 years because she's been thinking about this guy that she didn't even have a legitimate relationship with. Her fiance's name is Melvin. Poor Melvin. I also want to note that like when you start reading the second part of the book, like Shane keeps referencing to her fiance slash boyfriend as boyfriend. She doesn't just call him Melvin, my boyfriend. She literally is like, oh, boyfriend is calling me right now, or boyfriend is blah 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 this, and I was just like, what? Why? And then she refers to Pilot as something else, but she was like, other guy or something like that, and I was just like, what are you doing? We already know you're talking about Pilot, and like we don't know who boyfriend is, but like you could have just given him a name. We don't find out till later, and I'm just like, why? The choice to write it that way was really whack. I thought it was unnecessary and just confusing. We know this other guy that you're talking about is Pilot. We don't not know that. It was a weird choice to write it that way. So diving back into Shane as a 26-year-old, I thought that she would be a lot more mature now. Remember when I mentioned just going through years of medical school and finally coming down. Shane, as a 26-year-old, is just as immature as she was as a 20-year-old. When she was 20, she was basically like a 15-year-old. So she has been 15 for like 11 years of her life. She's so immature and juvenile. First of all, who refers to their boyfriend as a boyfriend and not by their freaking name? And who thinks about somebody they met 6 years ago and still thinks about what they could have been? It happens a lot in like rom-coms and stuff, but like in this book, just because I couldn't support their relationship in any way, I'm just like, why the hell are you thinking about this loser? And why did you lead on this other guy who legitimately loves you so much, he wants to freaking marry you, and you're over here being like, Pilot, we could have been great together. I just find it really ridiculous that this girl who's 26 and who is a doctor is so immature. She's still obsessing over Pilot. Like I said, he's totally not worth it, but like whatever. It's also been years and they didn't really have a real relationship like at all. It was like they flirted with each other. You know what? Like I understand her holding on to like the what ifs. I think about what if I did something differently a long time ago, but I don't like obsessively think about it to the point where I'm stalking this person and I find out where he works, shows up at his workplace completely out of the blue and basically is like, I want to talk to you. I want to know if what happened 6 years ago could have been something more. I want to know if you still think about me the same way I think about you. You know what? That line typically works in a rom-com, but in this sense, it was just really creepy as fuck. You know what? I can give her some credit for wanting to seek out Pilot and just like having some closure. She literally led on her fiance for all these years because she was like, he doesn't even know how I like my eggs and you've been together for several years. She was in this relationship because it was convenient, because I think he's also like another doctor, and also you just like fell into that relationship, and knowing that you have the capacity to feel stronger emotions than you do with him, like why would you lead him on, and why would you even like consider marrying this guy knowing that you don't feel the same level of love he has for you? Why would you settle for that, and why would you settle for a life that you don't want? Again, this goes back to the whole, like she literally could have moved out of her parents' house and supported herself. She literally didn't even fight back against her parents. Like she just went with it, and she's an adult. Like I just feel like all of her decisions were really silly. Like we don't know fully her situation with her parents, which again, I think should have been explored. So I feel like it just seems really ridiculous that she wouldn't even try to do something other than what her parents wanted for her. I mean, they were really mad that she lied, and honestly, totally get that, but like she didn't even try. Like in the 6 years, she didn't even try. She was so determined to change things in her life, she went to study abroad, and I feel like that is a big step. That's a huge step. And I just feel like, where did that girl go? The girl who decided, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna travel to a foreign country and I'm gonna go by myself and I'm going to change my life. Like what happened to that determination and that ambition? Like it seemed to just like flowed right out of her. Like where did that go? Where did that version of Shane go? Because honestly, she should have been here. Back to 2017, Pilot also hasn't changed at all. He's literally dating the same girl. I think her name's Amy, that he was 6 years ago, even though he and Amy had like such a terrible relationship with each other, and like he was already debating breaking up with her then, and he even admits to Shane, oh yeah, we're kind of having problems, and like we've been having problems. And I'm like, wow, that sucks. I'm over here like, I get like being stuck in a relationship and you feel like you can't really get out of it. I'm like, dude, it's been like 6 years and you literally haven't dated anyone else. Like what? Like first of all, Amy was horrible. Like even Pilot knew then. He was like, I don't really want to be with this girl, and yet he endured a relationship with her for 6 years. I just felt like it was really convenient that Shane was unhappy in her relationship and Pilot was also unhappy in his relationship, so that they could have a reason to be together, because they would be happier together than they would be with their respective partners. Let's talk about the time travel. Generally, I don't really like time travel because it raises too many questions, but I'm okay with time travel most of the time. In this story, it's like never explained. It doesn't necessarily have to be explained, but to me, it didn't make any sense like at all. So here's how time travel works in this universe. Basically, they had some kind of like guardian angel lady. It's this redheaded lady that sits next to Shane on the plane at the beginning of the book and like continues to pop up in random places throughout Europe. In 2017, Shane shows up to Pilot's workplace, is like, let's talk, and they go to this cafe, and this cafe is where their guardian angel is, and essentially she sends them back in time through this time traveling elevator, and they step out of this elevator and get dumped back into 2011 into their 20-year-old bodies. And basically they hunt down this redheaded lady and she's like, yeah, so I'm essentially like your guardian angel and like I sent you back in time so that you could do it again. And I'm going to hide some mysterious button somewhere around Europe in a place where you've traveled before. And should you choose to want to go back to your time, you can press this button. But if you don't want to, you can live out your life and rewrite your future. When they find this button, it's in Shane's, like, I think it's in her ravioli or whatever, and she like bites on it and it's like a necklace or like a locket or something. And I'm just like, that didn't make any sense. And then they basically relive their entire lives. And then the guardian angel comes back and is like, you didn't use the button, like I'd like it back. Like, I just have so many questions. Like, what happens to their original timeline when they go back in time? Does it just like erase? Like, do they just write over it? But like technically it still has to exist, because if they had chosen to go back to their original timeline, then that timeline would still exist. Would they just blip back into that moment when they're in the elevator and like no time has passed, or would like the same amount of time that's passed would have passed in the future? Like, did they disappear? Did people know that they were missing? And then here's the thing that I had questions about. They're 26 up here mentally, but they're in their 20-year-old bodies and they still have memories of this alternate timeline. Like, do those memories stick with them or do they eventually fade? How much deja vu would you have? Even though they like live it differently, there are still like things that you would know about a person. Like, they go back in time and like Shane breaks up with Melvin before they've even met, as if that like negates the fact that technically in their future they're still in a relationship. It's really weird. I don't really understand it, whatever. And technically it's not cheating because now she's 20 and she's never even met Melvin, but like technically she is still dating him, but not really. It was really weird. In 2011, Pilot's still with the same girlfriend, and this time around he actually breaks up with her, and I put that in quotes because he like literally leaves her a voicemail that she never gets, and then she shows up again in London and Shane's over here like, what the hell? Unnecessary drama, by the way. I was also wondering what it was like for them to be back in their 20-year-old bodies, and it's so weird, okay, because like this is the first thought that I had, was because when they go back in time they have sex with each other, and I'm pretty sure Shane was a virgin then, so her body is still one but her mind isn't, because I'm pretty sure she had sex with her fiance. But like, can you lose your virginity twice? Like, genuine questions here. Like, I'm asking the real questions here. Yeah, it was just super weird that they were in their younger selves' bodies, but they still had the mentality of their 26-year-old self. So basically they are mentally 5 years ahead. I would have liked to have like some random scene like in the future where Shane does end up meeting Melvin in some other capacity and kind of has like this really weird reaction. He's like, how do you even know my name? Or just like see Melvin in 2011 reacting to this letter that she sent him, breaking up with him. He's like, what? Basically it was like, my dearest Melvin, you don't know me yet, but you will. You'll fall in love with me and I'll lead you on and you'll want to marry me. But the truth is, I don't want to marry you. You know, just like, what? So the book's called Again But Better. So you would expect that when she goes back to 2011 and does it again, she would do it better. She didn't. Again, she was hyper focused on Pilot, but this time she actually did succeed in doing her internship, and like, that was good. So after them actually getting together, I thought that it was finally going to focus more on Shane and her personal development outside of Pilot and outside of like all that, like her chasing her dreams and stuff, but it really wasn't. I was also hoping that like maybe they would find out what it was like to be with each other and then actually decide to go back to 2017 and like fix their unhappy lives. Like, I think it would have been a much more interesting thing for them not to like basically relive their entire like experience, but to actually go back knowing that things could have been different, but that they could go back to the future and still take the opportunity to change things, like to properly break up with their significant others, to actually change their lives. Because to me, the thing about this book is like, it's a fun time travel-y thing, but to me it would have just been so much better if they didn't just relive their entire lives and actually kind of dealt with the consequences of the actions that they made in 2011. Like, it would have been so much more interesting and their character development would have been better. And I think that that experience should have helped them realize a lot more than just like, oh, we could have been together and now that we can, let's just live our lives like this. The biggest issue that I have with the ending of the book is that there is this moment where Shane's so angry with Pilot because of the whole Amy thing. And she goes off to, I forgot where it was, but basically she's like climbing this mountain. Like she went off by herself and she's finally having this moment to herself. And she's thinking to herself, she's like, you know what? This is the start of a new beginning. I could go back and I can change things in my life. And I don't freaking need Pilot. Like I don't need this. She finally has this moment of revelation. And I'm like rooting for her at this point. Like this whole book has been so frustrating. But this moment I'm like, oh my god, yes, 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 girl, you don't need him. You don't need this. Just go back to your original timeline and fix your life. But of course, that's not what happened. This moment where you finally start to see Shane develop as a character, Pilot shows up. He shows up with his guitar and starts serenading her on the side of this freaking mountain with Taylor Swift songs. And I'm over here like, yeah, she loves Taylor Swift, whatever. But like, what? He just shows up and then she forgives him and they live happily ever after. Like that's literally the book. And I'm just like over here like that whole moment, just like this one part where she's finally realizing that she can be so much more and she could do so much more with her life, should have been the pivotal moment. But all that just gets erased and replaced with, oh, Pilot shows up and they can be together. Oh my god. No. No, 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 no. It just made me so upset that Shane had all this potential to go through these experiences over and over again and realize that she can't really make anything go better than it did the first time. Like, I think it went just as terrible as the first time around, not better. And I feel like she could have went back to 2017 and changed things in her life. Like, that moment of realization should have been more important to her character. But nope, that didn't happen, and I'm so disappointed that it didn't. Like, she could have been a really strong, independent character, but no, she just relies heavily on Pilot, and like, her character doesn't exist with him, and his character doesn't exist without her. And again, like, I don't like them together, and I most certainly don't like them apart. But they should have been apart, honestly. So at the end, Shane achieves her dreams. She becomes a published author and she's still with Pilot, and her parents are there and they're proud of her. And I just felt like that was like the most random thing. Like, I understand what it's like for your parents to doubt you until the moment you're successful. Do they show their pride in you? Like, I get that, but I just felt like it wasn't really addressed enough in the book for it to feel as significant. To me, it just seemed like a complete 180 of their character, like the parents, to be so against it and then suddenly just be supportive of her now that she's successful. It happens, but I just thought it was a really strange thing to put in there because it was such a moment of tension in the book about her parents not supporting her, and then suddenly they are. And I also want to make a note that at the end of the book, like, it's her book launch party, I think, and this girl who is a fan comes up to them. She's like fangirling over Shane and Pilot's relationship, like relationship goals and stuff like that. And it's so cringy because Pilot and Shane are literally not a good example of a good relationship, like, at all. And maybe this girl doesn't have all the details like we do, but she was under the impression that the relationship between Shane and Pilot is something to strive for. And you know what? Maybe they have matured this time around. Maybe they are good for each other. Maybe they're better, which I highly doubt. But based on what I've seen and read about their character, it doesn't seem like that. So I just feel like their relationship is a poor example for Shane's fans to have, and just like giving them the wrong impression. It literally parallels Shane thinking that relationships in real life are relationships that you see in the media and in books and stuff. And I was just like, oh my god, she is just like poisoning the mind of like her fans as well. Like, this girl is young and impressionable, and that's not cool. There are a lot of things that I probably didn't mention in this review, but so overall, I did not enjoy this book at all. I actually really wanted to DNF it, but because I knew there was a time travel aspect, I wanted to see what would happen when she time traveled. And again, there was that moment, like I mentioned at the end, that I thought could redeem the book, but didn't. Again, she was still focused on Pilot, and I really was disappointed in this book because of that. I felt like the writing wasn't strong. I felt like the character was really immature. I felt like all the other characters were kind of just there. I feel like all the other characters kind of just existed to service Shane. Personally, I didn't enjoy reading this book. If you've read this, I would love your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, then give it a like. And if you want to see more of my stuff, then please hit subscribe and make sure to hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload, because I upload twice a week on Mondays and Fridays, and you don't want to miss out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!